Hello, welcome to the Peaceful Woodturner. I've got this piece here, I've had it for a little bit, not even sure what kind of wood it is, so you can see the bark on it. If you have any guesses what it is, please feel free to let me know. It had a big piece over here, a big knot over here. I've cut that off to make it a little smoother. I really like how the figure looks there, so we'll see how that works out. I'm just going to make a really simple candlestick. I just wanted to kind of do that this time. I've been making a lot of other things, and they always go through that one point where they look like a candlestick to me. So I decided this time I was going to go ahead and make a candlestick. So I'm going to start by just taking my roughing gouge and smoothing this out, and then I'll start working on my shape. So I've got my roughing gouge, and I'm going to go at about 1200 RPM. I'm finding that when I go at a higher RPM, I don't dig in as much, especially on pieces like this that have these little bits of uneven areas, and I think it's partly because my tool starts to work in between things when it's going slower. But when it's going faster, it just kind of keeps me out a little bit. It's looking nice. Well, that's a pretty piece of wood. So now I'm just going to start kind of shaping it out. I'm going to switch over to my spindle gouge to start with. Starting to get a good shape to it. Excuse me, my base. Over here is where the candle holder is actually gonna, or the candlestick is actually gonna sit. So as you can see, I kind of changed up what I was going to do. I was originally thinking to have some kind of rounded sections, kind of like little spheres in there, but I really liked how these lines looked, so I'm going to try to just kind of smooth this down a little bit and do some more similar lines down here. I am, however, using way too large a skew for this at this point, so I'm going to switch out to my smaller skew. Okay, I've got the little guy. Alright, so one thing I do have a problem with all the time is I get the little bits of catches and tear out right on the edges of these ridges. So that's something that I continue to struggle with. But other than that, that's got a really nice shape to it, and it's got some really cool figure in the grain. A little wormhole right there. Looks like it goes in kind of deep, so I don't think I'm going to be able to try to work that out too much. I think I'm just going to make a bigger hole if I play with that too much. So I'm going to work on these areas here, just see if I can sand them down a little bit. I'm definitely getting better with my skew. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting better. So a little bit more work here, and some smoothing up here, and then I'll get to the sanding. Okay, it feels pretty smooth. I do have some tool marks. I did want to do one other thing down here. I just want to put a couple of rings in here. I've never tried this before, but I'm thinking if I can just put a little bit of a mark here, a little bit of a mark here, just to kind of have a little bit of detail going on the base. I think that might be pretty. It's definitely worth trying. That worked pretty good with just the corner of the parting tool, but there's not quite enough definition there. I'm pretty sure you can barely see it on the camera. Let's see if I can take it in a little bit more. Alright, I like that. A little bit of tear out. I'm going to see if I can just shape it a little bit with the skew now. Got some nice figure to it. Gotta be careful right here just because the possibility of getting a really bad catch because of the wormhole. I think there's too much tear out here. I'm gonna see if I can take this down a little bit with the skew, smooth it out. It's gonna change the shape a lot. Alright, I'm going to smooth this, and then I'm going to get to sanding. Nice. A little bit of sanding, and then I'll work on parting this off a little bit. Okay, I've got 150 grit, and I've slowed my speed way down. I'm about 500 now. Pretty nice. I'm gonna start the parting just so that I know where I'm working to, and then once I do that, I'll continue to sand. I keep catching because that wormhole comes through right here. It's right there. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to have a problem. So I have to go real slow and not much pressure. Okay, good. I'm going to shape this a little bit up here. Just bring it in a little bit because I want to round at the top. Alright, I created a lot of problems for myself up there, but I think I got them mostly worked out. Whee! fresh piece. Alright, that's a pretty piece. What I'm going to do now is hit it with the sanding sponge, 320 grit sanding sponge, just to take a little bit more down, make it a little smoother. I can feel a little bit of rough spots. Up here is nice and smooth because of all the sanding I just did, but the rest of it still has a few rough spots, so hopefully I can get that out with the 320 grit sponge. Then I'll put a little bit of a finish on it before I part it off and really put the final finish on. I like these little grooves. They are a challenge for the sanding, but I need a challenge. Oh, that is smooth. That's really nice. That feels good under the hand. I'm going to burnish a little bit with some of the shavings, and then I'm going to move on to a finish. Very nice. I love this little bit right in here. I don't know if you can see that real well, but the way the grain goes right in there is really pretty. And these little knots that are just popping out on this side. It's got a stripe of dark right through here. This is just a really interesting little piece of wood here. So the next thing to do is I'm going to put a little bit of finish on it. I've been experimenting with a mixture of linseed oil and beeswax. And so I'm going to put a little bit of that on, and once I do that, then I'll part it off, do some more sanding on the top and bottom, and start putting the real finish on. So before I part it off, I just want to show you how this is coming out. Put on that mixture of beeswax and linseed oil. It's really, really pretty. It's neat how one side is very dark, and then as I turn it, it's very light on the other side. I thought I was having some problems with getting an even finish, but really it's just the colors of the wood. So I'm finding it to be really pretty. I'm liking it so far. Just going to cut it off here, cut it off here. Once I get this smooth, then I'm going to make my hole up here for the candle. I always have problems with that because I don't have a proper drill press. I've tried using one of the ones that you mount your handheld drill in, and I find that it kind of kicks out a little bit as I start to drill, so I really have trouble getting a straight hole with that. I do much better if I actually just get the piece stable and just go in with a regular drill. But I'm going to part it off, and then we'll get to the next step. So I've got this end parted off. Obviously this end is still attached. The problem I run into a lot of times with this is that I end up with kind of this this convex surface here from the way everything goes when I part it off, and most of the time it's not a problem, but obviously for something like this where we want it to sit really stable, we don't want to have any rocking there. So what I'm going to do is do a whole bunch of work with sanding and just try to take this down flat and maybe even a little concave. I'll also part this end off here and then be able to get to work on putting the final finish on and opening that end up. So I've got my palm sander with a really heavy grit. I already took some of this off just with handheld sandpaper, but right now what I want to do is kind of work on being able to not only take it down, but take it down so that it goes in a little bit. If I put it down, I got a little bit of wobble. Got a little bit of a weeble wobble candle holder here, so I don't want to have that happen. Let's see how stable we are. That's much better. All right. I'm gonna go to a finer grit just to smooth that off a little bit more and take this down. So I've got a 220 grit now. Much smoother. Got that wormhole going a couple different ways. It goes through there, a little bit there, and a little bit there. So apparently somebody had a nice little life in this piece of wood at one point. Alright, time to take off the top. So before I go too far, I just want to show you this. These are some candlesticks that I've made in the past. Earlier attempts, I kind of like the results on some parts of it, not so much on others. Getting a little bit better in terms of fine-tuning and doing some smaller work and being a little bit more careful. Problem I have, you can see it on both of these, is that as I try to make my hole using a spade bit, it's pretty good and sharp, but you always get a little bit of wobble, so I end up with these kind of rough holes. So I'm going to do my hole as carefully as I can. Again, it's the same size bit. It's just a 3/4 inch spade bit. Be much better with a Forstner bit. Just not something that I have at the moment, but that's definitely on my list of things to get. It's always a long list, but that's how it is when you have a workshop and you have ideas and you have plans and everything else. But I'm going to start by just putting a small pilot hole in, just using a 5/64 bit, real small, just to get myself going and hopefully find center. I basically just managed to show you the back end of the drill. I apologize for that. Because of the angles I'm stuck with here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill this off camera and then I'll show you the finish. Okay, I did my best. I put this into a vise. I had a couple pieces of wood to shield it, protect it, and actually I didn't get any marring on it, so I'm really proud of that. I'm really happy about that. I drilled my hole. As you can see, it's a little wonky, but it's pretty close to center. Not really how I want it. I really need to get myself the right stuff. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this down. I've just got my heavier grit sandpaper on here again, and I'm going to start by just smoothing everything. Alright, that's almost there. A little bit of rough there, a little bit of rough there. It's always tricky with the end grain. Alright, gonna switch out to a higher grit. Before I go too far, I'm just gonna use the sanding sponge, the 120 grit, and just kind of take this down a little. Okay, that's looking nice. Back to a higher grit on the palm sander. Got 220 grit on the palm sander. Okay, that looks pretty good. Time to start putting a finish on it.